Now, we are on the base of a beautiful private airport, and there's a plane below that just started up. So if you hear the engine noise, I can't go out there and stop it, or I'll get cut up. So hopefully it'll take off soon.
Okay.
We're right on the in the center of the Torrance Airport. We're on right in the heart of two runways, so it's really beautiful to watch. But a couple of planes are based right underneath our window, which is fun unless you're trying to talk to somebody.
Yeah, I feel yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but can
go
we?
for it. I'm here. Ask me or take me down any path you want, whether it's for purposes of the interview or purposes of getting to know each other or just fun dialogue. I'm easy.
Okay, well, first of all, let's talk about the most important thing here, which is that you got to go easy on yourself because your hair looks amazing. I mean, obviously, that's why I started paying attention to you is the hair.
But that's funny. I
Yeah.
I have been very blessed with two different attributes. One is really good genes, and two, uh, as I've gotten older, I've gotten more not fastidious, but more aware that my distinction, as long as it's not too arrogant looking, is a very powerful differentiator in how I am perceived, and it both is its style, its grooming, its mannerisms, its attitude, and it's not manipulative. It's just awareness that if I want to be seen more authoritatively, I've got to conduct myself more authoritatively. But there's a very fine line, not arrogant or full of hubris, but just really knowledgeable and operating from an elevation that is much more uh, more let's call it a higher trajectory than most people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that always appealed to me about you is that what's really, really clear is that you have like a really deep felt empathy for the people you work with, and that kind of shines through. It underlines everything you say, which there's a lot of people who get really good at marketing for the purposes of essentially manipulating people out of their money, and certainly that works. But there's another level where you actually want to like be with these people for life, as you said. I mean, the strategy of preeminence. I know
Yes.
it's a really smart guy who came up with that.
Thanks.
Um,
I'm very proud of that. But you're right. I've gotten to the point. I always was this way, but I'm really much more concerned with the well-being of the people that I deal with. Arguably more so sometimes than even monetizing it. I love passionate, purpose-driven entrepreneurs who are committed either knowingly or unknowingly, but their actions are positive to creating more value, to making their version of whatever it is they do make a difference, to giving more, being more, doing more, caring more, contributing more, and connecting more. And if I find anyone who's on that path but doesn't know how to really liberate what they're trying to do, it just turns me on outrageously, and I get very excited about trying to help them. And if I make money, it's great. But if I don't, it's usually not the end of the world until my accountant yells at me, and then I go, oh. But I just got I was doing something and I got my tax return. And I realized I spent $2 million on just gifting things away this year, and the staff and the service support people instead of keeping it for my indulgent lifestyle. I spent it on just gifting things and being a benefactor. It probably was worthwhile, but when I looked at income versus diversion of money, I went, oh geez, I think my wife will kill me when she sees the tax return.
That is amazing. I was actually just going to ask you that because One of the things I've noticed just from going through this whole process to connect with you, like somebody who's, obviously built up quite the authority and reputation over the years, you're not so easy just to get to. I've been actually trying to get this interview for a year. So I set it as a goal of mine to be able to connect with you, and you have this amazing team. So I've met your daughter, Desiree, and they're so full of enthusiasm and passion. And I was going to say, how do you get the right people like that? But it sounds like if you're showering them in $2 million of gifts, so that's pretty self-explanatory for why people want to go the extra mile.
Well, and it's more than that. I think that one of my very dear, I have a lot of very brighter and wiser and more authoritative and impressive colleagues than I could ever become. And one of them is really cool, and he's got a theory that you're either a multiplier or a diminisher in your life, whether you're a man or woman of influence, or whether you're what most would call a common person. You make the world better. You grow people. You make ordinary people exceptional. You grow, develop, all kinds of facets of their being, or you break them down and take exceptional people and make them worthless. And I always defaulted to the concept that every day you interact with anybody for any reason, for any amount of time, your job is to make them better off because you were in their life. And better off is denominated by many things. The first one is acknowledgement. And most people don't have the interest in acknowledging somebody else because they're so self-consumed.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyhow.
So
yes.
How do you approach, multiplying in sort of your daily relationships? Because that's a really, really interesting concept that I think has powerful both personal fulfillment aspects as well as, deep, business benefits as well.
Okay, well, I don't know if there's a formulaic approach, but I would say every day I make it a point to interact with somebody whose intellectual and pay grade is so much higher than mine. And I have dozens of what I would call masterful thinking partners who we just talk about stuff, and most of them are way out of my field, so I get perspective. I get to ask great questions. I am hopelessly curious, so I am obsessed with learning about anything and everything. I have a very, very deep, passionate appreciation and respect for the human condition, and I enjoy everybody. I enjoy the janitor. I enjoy everybody to me is not only relevant, but they have wonderful different viewpoints and realities. So I try to learn that. I spend a lot of time thinking about interactions I have had. Most people, if you ask them what happened yesterday, they wouldn't know because they're going from one montage of activities, experiences to another, and I try to think about what happened today in terms of what did I feel I made a great impact contribution doing? B, what did I think I did, let's call it feebly or disadvantageously to the betterment of the other person? What did I learn? What did I observe about that person that I really admired and that I would love to be more like, whether it's their enthusiasm, their humility, their focus, their subjects, their listening skills, their whatever. What did I find contemptuous about either them or myself in that context that I don't ever want to be? My wife, for example, says that if I am at a party and I drink too much, I talk too much about myself, which is the absolute antithesis of what I believe in. But I believe she's right. It's just a side that we try to lock up and compartmentalize in the catacombs of our mind. But when it escapes, that it's the demonic side of us, the bad boy side. But I think that listening and acknowledging is the first thing. being genuinely, if curious might not be the right word, goes back to interesting. I think always trying to be relevant to others, not trying to say, well, they're not relevant to me, so I'm not interested. And I think it's trying to really appreciate their reality. It's very fascinating. No two people are having the same experience. They're not having the same reality. Their definitions to words are not the same. And it's really fascinating. And realizing I've been very blessed, pardon me, realizing all the different factors, forces that go into the creation, the sustenance of our lives. It's just wonderful. And I celebrate discovery. I celebrate, and at my age, it's even more precious. A mind that can think about things deeply, can look at connectivity. I read. This is my wife hates this, but I read the obituaries every day, and I don't look at the real iconic people. Although they're impressive. I look at just the ordinary men and women who lived by many people's standards in ordinary life, but I think they're quite extraordinary. Maybe they coached 20 years of little league, and when their kids grew up they still did, or maybe they ran the kitchen at the church for 30 years, or whatever. Those are really spectacular achievements that are not honored, and I appreciate the not the vagaries, but the disparities of humanity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that takes some deep introspection to do that. I mean, could you actually tell me a story just about one time where you've been able to use that kind of, because it sounds like you're almost like learning in real time because you're so deeply introspective about every interaction you have.
And I think it's a wonderful privilege, but it's a very difficult process to teach because it requires being wired a certain way. Sure, I'll tell you the most definitive story possible because it changed my reality very, very profoundly. Many years ago when I started, I used to do a lot of seminars. We did $250 million of seminars when I was more, I don't know, how old are you? Were you in your 40s?
82 I was born. But I know a lot about.
So what would you be? Are you
35?
Okay, so when I was your age, I was an animal. I'm almost double your age. I'm not quite double, but I'm old enough to be very experienced in a lot of different decades. And when I was doing a lot of seminars, I traveled all the time. And one time I was in Australia getting ready to do 3 major seminars. This is 30 years ago, and we were charging $5,000 a person, which was a lot of money. And we were doing 3 $5,000 programs, one in each of the 3 top cities, and one $25,000 program, which was a more elite one. And that's in an era when most people were charging $500. And I'm not telling you this to be arrogant. I'm telling you to put it in context. So we were pretty big stuff until the advent of the internet, and it marginalized a little bit the distinction. But before the internet, in the early 90s, we were doing seminars all over, all the time, and I and my family had just flown into Sydney, and we were at the Sheraton downtown, and I couldn't sleep, they could. So I went up to the top floor where they had a concierge suite, and there was one man in the corner. And I walked up to him, and the only things I told him about myself was I was from the United States, and I was there on business. I didn't tell him that I was, at that time, the most highest paid seminar giver in the world, because I was doing 1,000 people, and I was doing them 15, 20 times a year, and I was doing them all over. I just told him that I was from the United States there on business. And I started asking him questions. And the first thing I found out was that he was from Germany. He represented one of the largest pharmaceutical companies. He traveled the world calling on third world health ministers, selling population control systems. I was very curious, not just how you sell a population control system, but what in the world they entail, how in the world you make a cold call to a third world health minister, what their criteria of decision making was to buy it, including under the table, when and how long it took to sell it, once and after you've sold it, how you literally disseminated a population control system, how happy the population was being controlled by that system.
Right.
And then I switched to, and I found out that first of all, he was connected to every health minister, major and third world in the world, and that in fact the annual conference of health ministers was going on in our hotel, and I should have known that because there were enormous quantities of security, and I was oblivious to it, and that he was a keynote speaker. I switched, still just he and I there, and I'm drinking Courvoisiers, which I stopped drinking for the reason I'm going to tell you. But I liked it. I had a bunch of them, and I switched. And I asked him about life in Germany. I wanted to know what lifestyle was like, what cost of living was like, what houses were like, both in style, in acreage, in prices, in locales, rural, urban, gated, all these things. I wanted to know what kind of employment environments he had, i.e. 4 weeks off, 3 weeks off. I wanted to know where he and his family would vacation. I wanted to know what he was going to do when he grows up, meaning he could stop working. And with his Rolodex, the Rolodex is what we used before the iPhone and the other phones had contacts in them. And then I just wanted to know about what kind of people were health ministers, and I wanted the disparity between a third world that might be more avaricious and whose ethos and ideals weren't not necessarily the best interest of the populace, vis-a-vis somebody who was pushing for very wonderful technological and innovative breakthroughs for the to extend life or save babies or whatever, was contributor to the World Health Organization. And I'm drinking and asking and a very, very deep conversation. And finally I felt really, really let's say intoxicated. I won't say drunk, intoxicated, where I was worried that I wouldn't be able to walk. I'd have to crawl to the elevator. So I very politely thanked him for the conversation, and I stood up and I waddled my way to the elevator. And when I got to the elevator, he stopped me, and this was profound to me. And he said, "I have to tell you, you are one of the most interesting people I have ever met." And for a moment in my semi-drunken stupor, I'm leaning on the framework of the elevator, hoping and praying the doors don't open and it's just a shaft, because I don't have enough stability to avoid it. I would just be goner. And thinking, wow, what he just said is, if you want to be interesting, be interested. And then I evaluated the extension of that. You want to be relevant, make people relevant. You want to be respected, respect. And it was a very profound and a cathartic and a very, let's say, perspective shifting experience for me. I hope that's an adequate one for you.
I'd say that's pretty awesome, actually. Leads me to so many follow-up questions, really.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, have you always been like that deeply curious about people?
Yes. I think that, I got started at age 18, got married. I had no college. I had I had 2 kids at 20, the needs of somebody at 20, for 40 at the age 20, and nobody cared. The only people that would give me jobs weren't really salaried. They were percentage of performance. And when you only eat when you earn. You figure out very quickly what works and what doesn't, and what works best. But I got bored very quickly, and I was a transient in the beginning, jumping from one industry, not just job, to another, to another, to another, until I made the pattern observation that no two industries even thought alike. They didn't have the same strategy, they didn't have the same beliefs, the same ideology, they didn't have the same marketing, selling, distribution channels, business models, and you could take excerpts from one industry that are very common to that industry, and you could combine them with other industry excerpts and then apply them to an industry where everybody in that industry did the same thing the same way, and just kill it by introducing what was effectively massive innovation. And then I became really interested in all I could learn, and I fascinate constantly in learning about things I don't know, or in seeing derivatives of things I have done or know, and I'm able to extrapolate. And I think all my life I've had a natural and an unquenchable thirst for understanding of how different businesses operated, how things got made, how how I'm curious sometimes watching how groceries get delivered and shelves get stocked, and I've had a lot of experiences along the way that gave me a context of understanding, because I've been involved with so many industries and so many different facets that I have and this is not trying to say I in terms of arrogance, it's just clinical, that I have almost a three-dimensional understanding of more aspects of it than most people. I can conceive, how it operates. I can conceive how it generates. I can conceive the stages it goes through. I can conceive of, how it's the same or different than other industries. And it gives you great insight, but it's an enormous, not a burden, but it's an enormous, I don't know what I call it. It's a lot of knowledge that you're carrying around in your brain, if that makes sense, and correlation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is positively brilliant that I'm probably going to ask you for an example of is you're one of the masters really of like borrowing from one industry and then pioneering it in another where, they don't use that, but it's not necessarily new. In fact, actually, a couple of mutual friends of ours, Ken Hardison, told me that when he joined your highest level mastermind that you sent him 300 plus pages of testimonials as a way.
Our whole model was, I'll give you an example. When I sold seminars, nobody was using endorsements, and I funded mailings to all kinds of people, from very prestigious and trusted advisors and investment gurus and economists, telling them how great I was, and maybe not try to be arrogant. And we just killed it. When we ran ads, most people would run a one-page ad. We would run 16 to 20 pages in a in-flight. The first 4 would be actual methodologies that people could validate instantly and they could use when they got off the plane. The second were endorsements from prominent people, which were cool. And there were different kinds of endorsements. They weren't just light and easy. They went deep, and they went exploratorily to different facets of my skill set, so that it really gave a context. But the best part about it was we would have 3 full pages of testimonials from attendees or clients representing the broadest spectrum of industries and locales. And that wasn't so cool, because a lot of people did that, and they would have a name that would be abbreviated Tom C., Florida. We would have the full name. We would have the name of their business, the location, and their daytime phone number. People thought we were insane because nobody did that, but these people were so joyous about the impact we had made, and they wanted to help other people garner it. We'd just have a disclaimer that said to only call them if it's the last mile in your due diligence process. Don't waste their time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we always did things like that where I'd borrow things that nobody. But we would, when people would call wanting consult, and they would say, well, why should well, I have many different models. One would be, why should I hire you and invest in you? And we'd say, no, that's the wrong question. If you want to pay us a full fee and you don't want me to take any risk on you, then that's a good question. If I'm going to take 85% of the risk on you and we're going to ask you to take 15 on us, you got to persuade us that you're worth the investment. If it was somebody that we wanted really badly, or we were selling a seminar and they were at all apprehensive, we would say, let's just stop right here and let's do a little experiment. Will you give us your address? And they'd say, why? And we'd say, well, you'll know by tomorrow morning and we'll call you afterwards. And we would overnight them this 8-pound book that had, at one time we had one with 501 testimonials and success stories and phone numbers in it. And we would send it to them overnight. And we'd say, okay, now what, or they'd want, we also got so many testimonials that they'd say, well, I need proof. And we would say, okay, cool. Do you want a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen people, and do you want them in the same industry? Do you want them who just market the same way? You want rural? You want urban? You want people who are single operators like you? You want people who are more ambitious and really use this to grow, and they have 12 or 15 facilities? What do you want? And it would blow people's mind.
That is extremely powerful and brilliant. Actually, I was going to ask you, because one of the things I love about you, Jay, is that you've been able to work in many, many different industries, which gives you such a just a broad perspective on the things that are common among all businesses.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, in your experience, what are the things that you see when you've had really, really big success stories, not just you, but your own clients as well? What are the things you see that make the biggest difference?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, truthfully. And we address some of them in the book, The Sticking Point, which we give away, so it's not even something I'm trying to hustle. But first thing is, almost none of the companies that I look at under, I don't know, 100 million are very strategic. They're very tactical. And when you move, I've spent my life almost totally focused on what I would say working on the upside geometry in a business, all the different changes in activities, efforts, interactions, communication, positioning that would make the results of each facet of what you do increase by orders of magnitude, so that the same effort, the same investment, the same access, the same ad, the same salesperson, the same prospect, the same transaction could deliver a multiplied yield, and that the combination of all those multiplied yields produced a geometric gain. So there's a lot of things, but first is they're not strategic. Second is they've never really, there's a quote, I'm not having an ADD moment, I'm interrupting myself. There's a quote from Socrates, "A life unexamined is a life not worth living." And I believe that a business that is not constantly examined and re-examined at as many impact points or leverage points within their revenue system, and I deal mostly with revenue, so I'm not going to give you good operational advice, is a business not worth owning. And if you don't know how different elements of your revenue system are performing, and if you look at it in a nuclear way or a granular way, there might be 50 different factors that you can improve in your system. And while you're not going to improve all 50, if you improve 20 of them, you're going to blow the profits out of the ceiling. And most people don't really know how to test. They don't know how to quantify. They don't realize how much more performance capability resides in what they do. I've been very blessed. I've helped 300 of the premier experts in the business and the management and the selling world. I've helped the Deming organization, father of optimization process improvement. I've helped the largest multivariable testing organization in the world who would look at thousands of variables and compare them on a multitude of different criteria.
Is that Agora?
No. This is actually a testing firm. It's called Qualpro.
Interesting.
And I helped the largest. You know who this is. I helped Decision Quest. It's the largest litigation strategic consulting firm in the world, and I got to look at hundreds of millions of dollars of case studies, and I got to see the variations in different things, everything from venues to putting 5 or 4 cans on the top or in the center or at the bottom of the shelf, to following up certain ways after a sale. We tested one time 33 ways of greeting people at the front door of a very large furniture group, and one change in the greeting tripled results. I mean, I understand the power of a multitude of intangible facets of a business that are not going to be recorded or even show up on a financial statement, but have the highest chance of massively and unimaginably increasing the profit performance, the strategic impact, the prestige, the prominence, the results, accelerating, multiplying, sustaining, regenerating. And most people don't even have a clue, because I've just been blessed by being involved in so many different industries and been able to look at so many facets and been able to distill them, if you will, into categories.
Yeah, you actually once, there's an awesome story, if you wouldn't mind retelling it, where you saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal and they were selling gold or something of that nature.
Yeah. It was a client I picked up because they were running ads in the Wall Street Journal. This was an era when gold was very, very popular and cheap. And gold back then was $300 an ounce. And this company, there were all kinds of different companies selling gold all kinds of different ways. Some would sell it for physical delivery. You'd get it sent to you. Some would sell it on a leverage basis where a bank would finance it. Some would sell it paper, where you basically bought a gold stock. And I helped everybody. Back then I was helping everybody. And I saw this company that was selling bank-financed silver and gold. And they ran ads in the Wall Street Journal with headlines that said, bank financing silver and gold, two-thirds bank financing on silver and gold. And they were running ads that made enough money that they made a profit, paid all the salespeople good, paid management, and had money to reinvest. But when I looked at that headline, it's a denominator of leverage or inverse leverage, didn't really say anything. It was just a declaratory statement, two-thirds bank financing on silver and gold. And if you study direct marketing, impact marketing, the psyche of the of the prospect, they don't really respond well to what I would call features. They respond to benefits, to advantages, to outcome, to protection, to enrichment, to entertainment. And the analogy we use is, if you go to a hardware store to buy a drill, you don't really want a drill, you want a hole, or you want to fasten something. So back to the ranch. So when I saw that they were just basing a declaratory statement, two-thirds bank financing on silver and gold, it didn't really mean a lot. And you had to really think. Whenever you make the mind have to work hard, you're losing a huge portion of your opportunity cost. So I went to them and I said, let's just try not changing the body copy, not buying a bigger ad, same cost. Let's just change the headlines. And I tested a bunch of headlines, and without going through all of them, one was 40% better, one was, I think, 100% better, one was a little less. Because when you test, you'll find lots of variation, and variation is a profound advantage when you understand how to harness it. But one headline increased results 5 times, 500%. And I won't keep you in suspense because we're on a timeline. But the headline was, and this was back when gold was about $300 an ounce and silver was about $6. So you remember the old one was 2/3 bank financing, which was a declaratory, but it didn't tell you what it meant to you. So what my winning headline, it was 500% greater yield, greater result, greater response, greater profit for the same space, same money, the same access to the same number of readers, was, if gold is selling for $300 an ounce, send us just $100 an ounce and we'll buy you all the gold you want. We did the same with silver. Silver is $6 an ounce, which it was about then. Send us just $2 an ounce and we'll buy you all the silver you want. And that was the denominator of the payoff, the benefit, what we were really saying in that 2/3 bank financing. And that just kicked ass.
Yeah, it's like you said earlier in this conversation. I mean, it really makes clear the value you're going to get right up front. I mean, it's a much more powerful statement.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people don't realize that people want to know what's the benefit. They want the reason why, and reason why is a filament that flows through a lot of things. What's the reason you're doing this? What's the reason I should do it? What's the reason I should buy from you and not someone else? What's the reason I should buy your product and not somebody else's, or not buy your product or somebody else's by an alternative means? And if you can't answer that, then any business you get is almost accidental and undeserved.
Yeah, let me ask you on that. I mean, you've seen really every marketing strategy under the sun, and I'd like to think you're still amazingly relevant with the internet, because that's how I found you. I've watched every YouTube video you've ever made.
Well, my stuff still works translated. I'm not very technological, but my stuff, when translated, pulls pretty damn well. Because it's all the same. It's based on human nature.
Exactly. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that if you study, like, early mail order stuff from 100 years ago, people are still people, and it works every bit the same.
It's all universal. You might have to tighten it, and might have to be different, a different way of expressing it, but the basic premise and elements are all the same.
Yeah, definitely. The principles never change. Let me ask you on that. I mean, you've seen every marketing strategy under the sun. Like, what's your all-time favorite, and really why? I mean, because you get to use so many leverage points in a business.
Well, I always loved people who played a long game instead of a short game.
Yeah.
That requires strategy. And I always loved people. I'll tell a story. I know we're on timeline, but let me tell the story because it's interesting, because this is old, but it's very indicative. Well, I'll tell you a couple of things that are my favorite stories, because a couple of them they're delightfully fun. Let me start with the fast ones, and then I'll go to the long one. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
please.
Famous story, which is true, is that years ago, Colonial Penn started out as a insurance company that was going to sell large groups, and they had a lot of difficulty getting traction. And after a while, a very logical and bright person there said, well, if we can't get clients to sell, why don't we create our own captive one? And they created the AARP, the American Association of Retired People, so they would have a client, and they created 14 million members and billions of dollars of sales. We had the first time I went to China, I've been about 40 times now. I did a very expensive seminar. A young man came to the mic, and he asked through translation, Jay, what do you do if your business is too small and the banks won't lend you money to grow? And I always ask the question, well, if you had the money, how would you use it? And his answer was, I'm a small local motorcycle manufacturer. Now, only in China, with a city of 100 million, could you be a small local motorcycle manufacturer. And he said, if I had the money, I'd want to go to all over Asia. I'd want to plant. I'd want to make motorcycles outside. I'd like to get salespeople, dealers, and sell it all over Asia. And I said, okay, but I still don't understand why you need the money. And he got frustrated because he said, I just told you. And I said, no. You told me the end result. You didn't tell me that it needs money because it doesn't. Your problem is always going to be the solution to someone's bigger one, and oftentimes that someone doesn't even know they have the problem. But if you find them and you make them aware of the problem, you can make a fortune without having any investment or risk or anything. And I said, go all over Asia and find a company that is not competitive but is complementary, that has a huge factory that is being underutilized, that already has distribution, salespeople, dealers, and make a deal with them. And that took me, 30 seconds? And the guy, just 1 second. Yes? Okay, we will. I'm sorry. Let me finish this because they're really fun stories. So I came back a year later, and the guy comes to the mic again, and he looks like somebody he looks like the Cheshire Cat. He's just beaming with joy. And he says, I did what you said. And I spent almost all my time solving problems, so I don't really remember what I said. And he said, I went to Asia. I found the largest lawnmower manufacturer in Kuala Lumpur. I went there and made a deal. They had a huge factory. They weren't even using the second shift. They provided the workers. I just had to bring the tool and dies. They already had 1,000 dealers all over. They had sales force. They had offices. Together, we split $10 million of profit in our first year for almost no investment. That's pretty cool. There's a guy, this is pretty cool too. There's a guy that loved Porsche automobiles, but he could never afford one. And he found out there was a small dealership in Northern California available for sale, and it required, I think, $1 million cash in order to get it from Porsche, whatever, USA or Germany. And he didn't have it, but he got the paperwork on what a dealership's, what it included. And in there, he found a little codicil that gave him a great idea. It turns out that you can make, maybe not today, but you could make almost as many cars demos as you want. A demo basically is a car that has less than 3 months or 3,000 miles on it. It doesn't have to be licensed as used. It can be where it uses dealer plates, and you can sell it as new at a slight discount and still make a profit. With that one piece of distinction and a brilliantly innovative mind, he ran ads all over California saying, drive a brand new Porsche every year for life for a one-time investment of $75,000. And he got over 200 people to do it. He would give them demos. Many of them would buy them. They would rotate them. They became the best salespeople for him because they had de facto interest in the business. But by the way he did it, he didn't give away a penny of equity. He didn't owe 1 cent of interest on the money, and he got more than he needed. He got approximately $1.5 million, and he had $500,000 operating cash besides the money he paid to Porsche. I think that's pretty cool nonlinear thinking, and I'll give you one more that's equally as cool, and I'll tell you about strategy if I have time, but my assistant's saying I've got to leave shortly. But Carnival Cruise, who who they are, when they started out, the owner, who's the father of the billionaire now who has it, I think his name was Mickey Aronson Sr., a friend of mine worked for him, so he swears this is true. They had one boat, used boat. He couldn't afford to paint the whole thing. Only one side was painted, so he had to always pull in on the painted side. And it would go out half filled or half empty, however you want to say, every week. And half empty means that 400 rooms worth about $800 are going down the tube, not figuratively, but literally. And that's 400 times 800 is $320,000 of buying power every week that's being dissipated. He realized he could take that buying power have someone go to radio stations, television stations, magazines, newspapers, and trade credit to use those rooms to media in exchange for advertising for his cruise line, and he would give them 2 years to use it, knowing that over time the time value of money diminishes. So he's basically getting, and he would get his advertising right now, so he'd get paid people to use the rooms, and the media had all this time to use their credits, but the credits were going to be worth less and less over time, and he's getting cash up front. And he really got basically not only an interest-free loan, he got a loan where the payback was below the principal, and it was interest free. It was pretty wild, and he used that to parlay. I think the first year they did some number of tens of millions of dollars. And I can go on but people are great strategists, people who can understand how to utilize intangible assets, people who understand how to bring somebody in and build a relationship, and then make the real profit on subsequent purchases or upgrades. I mean, people like that turn me on because they're really bright and they understand, and they're willing to think very, very masterfully in a nonlinear way, and that's just, to me, beautiful.
Yeah, that's actually really amazing. Yeah, a friend of mine that is a huge fan of yours as well. His name is Dan Crystal. He turned me on to trading, and I actually just recently bought a piece of land using some barter strategies, which is kind of exciting. I literally bought a piece of land in Colorado with no money down.
Well, I'll tell you a story. And again, this is first of all, I bill out. We rarely charge this to people we think will be clients, but we have a rate of $100,000 a day. When you bill $100,000 a day, your trading power is very profound. My wife has a red Porsche convertible I traded for her 5 years ago. She has a supercharged Range Rover. It's tricked out. I traded for her. She's got an RS7 Audi, really hot car for 2 years that somebody leased for me for modest amount of consulting. We just got a deal for a brand new G63 AMG that we okay, 1 second, I'm going to get yelled at again. Okay, I'm coming. Give me 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes. Okay, just throw it all in the box. I'm sorry. She's cleaning as we talk. We moved into a new house, and I had it all decorated with trade. My wife has a outrageous jewelry collection that I traded for years ago. But if you understand that, and trading we've taken it to, it's an art form. You can trade for your own interest. Anything you've got that it's got a high margin and is not and no difficulty recreating it, you can trade for. You can trade for something that somebody else wants and sell it at a cash discount that's better than you would normally make for your product or services. You can triangulate it with somebody to get something you want, and we've done profit centers with car dealers where we'd basically take a car that didn't have a lot of margin. We trade it 2 to 1 for soft things. In other words, if you had let's say you were a carpet cleaning service, and the car dealer would use, every 2 weeks, and maybe they'd spend $60,000 a year with you, we would go and say, we'll trade to a different carpet service, or to you. We'll trade you a $30,000 car or $35,000 for that. So we're doubling the margin we get. And we would normally write a check for cash. So we're doubling the margin and buying a service we would normally pay cash for at that 40% off. And we've even done it with just a lease car where we gave them the use of the car, but we valued it at the sale price, and we would keep exchanging it. I can go on and on and on because we've done it as profit centers for people all over, but I'm getting yelled at. And if you want to, we can continue this and make this part 1.
Yes, I would absolutely love that, because I have a million more questions for you. And Jay, you're just, you're brilliant, and I love that you got a big heart, that you want to share all this and help other people succeed. Like you're one of those types that, like all I forget how the saying goes, but
Well,
all
it's very
boats.
gracious, and I'm flattered that you've been impacted by it. And uh, we have dedicated a goodly portion of the last 10 years to really touch people because the vast majority can't afford me. And rather than disacknowledge them, I've realized that if I invest in them, the downside is zero. The upside is they're going to be better, more preeminent. They're going to add more value societally. Their team will be better for it. They'll grow. They probably all have somebody they know in their life, a vendor, a brother-in-law, somebody who could be a client. So there's no downside, and it gives us a great uh, position as a benefactor, pardon me, to the entrepreneurial world. So it's been our great pleasure. And if you'll allow me, I would love to continue this because I'm flattered that you understand me at a deep level of truthfulness, and you associate with people who've been impacted by me. So if you want to do more, just schedule it, and I'll be happy to.
Please, I'll reach out to Desiree. Before you go, can you just say hi to a couple people who are big fans of yours? Obviously, we have some mutual friends in
Sure.
Oliver
Who are they?
Talamayan. Oliver Talamayan, as I mentioned, Com Mirza.
Well,
You
Oliver,
worked with.
hi, Oliver. You introduced us. Tom,
Yes.
hello. It's a pleasure. Thank you for whatever. I always am thankful for people who trust my recommendations, who trust my advice enough to try it out in an application in their business, and that pleases me enormously. People who will take action, even if they interpret it differently, if they don't execute exactingly, I'm flattered and overwhelmed and greatly appreciative. Anybody else?
Ken Hardison, who was also one of your
Sure. I mean, I love
mastermind members.
Ken. Yeah, I love Ken. Tell Ken that he's one of my favorite people. He's darling. I love him, and I think what he's done. There's a lot of people that are niche players that make a big difference in the lives of different kinds of professionals or service providers, and he's one of them. And I suspect just by the quality of questions and the focus and the ability to communicate as well as you do, that you make a very big difference too. And I'll be very interested in the next segment of our discussion to learn more about you and not just tell you all about me. But don't think me rude. Think me very grateful and appreciative and apologetic. But I've got to be somewhere, and so please let us continue. And thank you.
Thank you again, Jay.